So I recently played in the Stuttgart Pokemon Regional Championships, where I managed to finish 10th place using this team. So I'm going to be doing a video talking about the team. Even though it's a fairly standard looking team, I think there's still some quite interesting choices on it that I think are worth talking about. And I was actually on stream round 10 of the regional, hence this screenshot. So I will also be doing a video looking back on that round, so if you're interested to see my thought process during an actual game, make sure to subscribe and stick around for that. So first I'll talk about the team building process. So this team started by me wanting to test Annihilate Dragonite, because I had seen Annihilate Dragonite do very well with coaching Annihilate. So I wanted to see if I could find a new way of building that duo. And I thought that maybe it could work well on Rain. We'd seen Victor Medina get second at LAIC with Dragonite on a Rain team before, so I thought maybe Annihilate Dragonite with Pelipper Archaludon could work very well. So that's how I added Pelipper Archaludon. And then as the last two slots, I wanted to test Basculegion, because I felt like I haven't tested it in a while, and when I did test it I used the Scarf Adaptability set, when maybe the Swift Swim set is much better. Basculegion also seemed interesting to me as well because I could coaching Basculegion, which seemed like it could be a huge threat in some matchups. And then as the last slot, I felt like I needed something like Amoonguss or Sinistcha. I decided to go with Sinistcha because I haven't really tested Sinistcha much, and I felt like the immediate recovery from Hospitality was probably more useful for Archaludon than the Pollen Puff and Spore that Amoonguss offers. And after testing some more with this team, it felt very strong, but the Annihilate slot actually felt like it wasn't right on the team. So I knew that that was the slot that I wanted to change, but there was a few things I wanted to improve my matchup versus. Main one being Terra Fairy Dragonite. So the team kind of struggles to hit Terra Fairy Dragonite, it relies on Archaludon a lot. And if the Dragonite is paired with something like a Sneasler, which a lot of them are, I really struggled to not let it just do a lot of damage to her teams. So I felt like I either needed some damage reduction in that slot, or just something that can really threaten Dragonite whilst also not being scared of Sneasler. Another issue I found was Gholdengo. Now I have 0 Ghost Resist on this team right now, so I felt like I probably wanted a Ghost Resist. And I wanted something that could threaten it. Because right now I only have one thing that can one-shot it, and that's Basculegion in Rain. And I never want to rely on Basculegion in Rain to beat something because there's so many ways to stop that from working. Just by having a Rillaboom, for example, can threaten the Basculegion. So I knew I wanted something for that. But I also knew that if I was replacing Annihilate, I needed an Amoonguss answer. Because right now, as you can see, this Annihilate is the Safety Goggles set with Taunt. And I felt like I needed Taunt for my Amoonguss matchup, and probably on a Safety Goggles mon or something that is immune to Spore, like an Overcoat Pokemon, but I can't even think of one, except like Mandibuzz. I'm not going to use a Mandibuzz. Actually, maybe Mandibuzz would have been great on this team, but I decided to use Incineroar. Who'd have thought a VGC player deciding to use Incineroar? Wow, I really am a revolutionary. But it was actually suggested by a friend of mine. I didn't really think about Incineroar in that slot, but my friend Rebecca Dixon was like, it intimidates Dragonite and intimidates Sneasler, which is quite good. And Intimidate with Archaludon is just really strong. It resists both of Gholdengo's stabs and can knock it off, which is really useful. And you can run Safety Goggles Taunt on it to stop those Amoongusses. So that's how I decided to use Incineroar. And believe it or not, this is the first time I used Incineroar in a tournament since the 2019 World Championships, so it's been a while since I've used it. But anyway, to talk about the sets, because I think that is the most interesting part of the team. So, firstly, the Dragonite is a fairly standard one. It's loaded dice with Scale Shot, which is really powerful because you either get an 100 or an 120 base power Dragon move. Whereas in a lot of other formats, Dragonite has relied on its Terra to be able to do damage by going Terra Normal, Extreme Speed, or Terra Flying, Terra Blast. But with Scale Shot loaded dice, you don't have to rely on Terra, so it's just really strong. It also boosts your speed by 1, which is really nice because it essentially gives you a Scarf Dragonite after 1 hit, but it does minus your defense, which is usually a big downside on a lot of Pokemon, but because of Dragonite's multi-scale, it doesn't come up as much, because even when you've lowered your defense by 1 or 2, you're probably still going to be able to take a physical move. I think that's why we've seen loaded dice Scale Shot on Dragonite a lot more than other Pokemon. We've obviously seen it on Basculegion a bit, but I think Dragonite is clearly the best user of it. So with the Terra type, I went with Terra Fairy, and the main reason for that was to be able to deny other people their Scale Shot. Now, Terra Steel is also a good option, which means you wouldn't be taking as much from Scale Shot, but I think that sometimes just denying the speed boost on the opponent can be huge, and that's why I chose Terra Fairy. Terra Steel lets you resist much more, which is quite nice, especially resisting stuff like Gholdengo, letting you resist fairy moves, and making you immune to Diaclaw, as Diaclaw can be very random, and even though they can close combat you, because of multiscale, you should be able to take it. So I think Steel is also a very good option, but I think the power of just denying someone a scale shot, or at least making them question if they can scale shot your Dragonite, is really strong. And then other moves, I went with Haze. Haze is very good for this format because there's so much setup. There's Archaludon, there's King Gambit, there's Gholdengo, there's Volcarona, Porygon 2 even gets boosted. Coaching is a huge thing this format. There's so much setup that Haze is huge into, and it also gives me a Dondozo matchup. Now, Dondozo Tatsugiri is something that if you don't prepare for, it's really hard to beat. So being able to just have Haze on the team was really nice. Protect is one of the best moves in VGC, especially on a multiscale Pokemon, because it means I can protect in front of fake outs or just keep my multiscale intact when I need to be. And then lastly, I went with Extreme Speed. Now, a lot of people have been going Tailwind on this sort of Dragonite, and I think that is also very strong, but I really didn't like the idea of just having Scale Shot as my only move. Because for starters, it's not 100% accurate, so if I'm in a situation where I just need to hit this thing and I win, relying on Scale Shot is not the nicest, but also fairies are immune to Scale Shot, and I didn't want to be in a situation where I need to hit a fairy, but I can't, and then would lose the game because I can't hit this fairy. So Extreme Speed was really nice, and it also adds some powerful priority, which is really nice. It's higher priority than most other priority moves at +2, so Extreme Speed was really nice. I don't regret running it, and I didn't really miss Tailwind that much, although I do think Tailwind is strong. And then with my spread, I just went max attack and max speed. I might have actually gone for defense. I can't remember. I think I did that for like multi-shot rolls, but I can't remember. But it's max attack, max speed, which I think is probably the best on this sort of Dragonite. Like, you're taking hits because of multi-scale anyway, so you just want to be doing as much damage as possible, and then you might as well be max speed, because you're multi-scale, you're going to be taking hits really well. I do think that Jolly is an option as well if you're really scared of Dragapult, because you don't outspeed Dragapult at +1 with this Dragonite, but you lose out on so much damage by going Jolly instead of Adamant that I think you want to be Adamant. And the next Pokemon to talk about is Pelipper. Now, Pelipper obviously brings rain, and as this is a rain team, that is very useful. So it needs the Drizzle ability. I went with Focus Sash because I just really like that security on Pelipper. It means you can run max speed and max special attack. And Pelipper is a Pokemon that doesn't have particularly good stats anyway, so being able to run Focus Sash means you can make the most of its special attack, which is still quite low, but in rain it still does a good amount of damage. I went with Modest because I wasn't too scared about the Pelipper Mirror, and I felt like the extra damage from Modest was probably more useful than the extra speed from Timid. I would need to do more testing to see if that's actually the case, because maybe Timid is better, but Modest was really nice for the whole tournament. And then with moves, firstly I went with Hurricane. Hurricane is a very powerful flying move that can't miss in rain and is 70% accurate outside of rain. Flying Stab is just really nice in general. It also has a 30% confusion chance. 30% is definitely not a low possibility, so Hurricane sometimes can just punish people for making a defensive play where they might switch out their Rillaboom into a Gholdengo, but maybe then they get confused and potentially can't move. So Hurricane can just punish people for making the correct play, which is very nice to have. Next move I want to talk about is Tailwind. I had no Tailwind on the team already, so Tailwind just felt nice, especially with Focus Sash, because it means people have to double my Pelipper to deny me Tailwind, apart from like Scale Shots and like Bullet Seeds and stuff. Like, multi-hit moves are the only way you don't have to double me, but they have to double my Pelipper to stop Tailwind, which can give my other Pokemon a free turn, which when you're using something like Archaludon and Basculegion, a free turn can be huge. Protect, I wanted just to be able to keep the Focus Sash intact. I think that if you want another move on Pelipper, Protect is the one that you would change on this sort of Pelipper, so maybe something like Helping Hand or Wide Guard, but I think Protect is way better. And lastly, I want to talk about Muddy Water. Now, a lot of people have been running Weather Ball on Pelipper, and Weather Ball is very good, but Muddy Water gave me spread damage. And that's something that I don't really have on this team otherwise. Like, the one spread move that I do have is not very powerful. So being able to have Muddy Water, which does a lot of damage in rain, was huge. And it was really nice to use it to just get around Follow Me's. It actually won me many games being able to get around Follow Me with my Pelipper. And even won me games because people would expect me to be Weather Ball. Despite the fact that they have my team sheet, they see a Pelipper, they see its standard, and they're like, well, it's going to Weather Ball me. I'm going to follow me, and then you Muddy Water, and that literally won me games. So Muddy Water was huge. It's just not the most accurate. So if your Rain runs out, then you don't have any 100% accurate moves on your Pelipper, so that is something to watch out for. It also has a 30% chance to lower the opponent's accuracy. And during the tournament, I did lower some opponents' accuracies, but they never actually missed, so it didn't really benefit me at all during the tournament. In fact, in my top 16 game, I lowered the accuracy of their Kingambit, putting them to +2, so that was really not nice. So the accuracy lowering was really just not useful. And now the last thing to talk about on Pelipper is the Terra type, where I've gone with Terra Dark. Now, I don't think I've ever seen another person run Terra Dark Pelipper. And the reason for that is because it is such a situational terror that it is very rare that you would ever have to use it. But the reason I ran it is for male Indeedee. Now, the regional before this, Carson Confield won with a male Indeedee Sneasler team. And the interesting thing about that male Indeedee was its only attacking move was Expanding Force, which is a psychic move. So, by having Terra Dark of a Pelipper, I can make it so that Indeedee cannot do damage to my Pelipper. Which means in that matchup, if they lead Indeedee into me, I am guaranteed a Tailwind. And I think in that matchup, Tailwind is huge, because in this matchup, from their point of view, they can't really bring the Whimsicott, because they have to be bringing Indeedee, Sneasler, Electabuzz, and Blood Moon. That is easily the best four for them to bring. If they leave one of them, their team into mine becomes a lot less powerful. So by having the Terra Dark on Pelipper, I can basically always guarantee I'm going to get a Tailwind versus that team. Like, my plan versus that team was lead Pelipper, Basculegion. And if they lead Indeedee, Sneasler, I can probably just protect, set up a Tailwind. And I guess they could be annoying and Trick Room, but that's a really big read for them to make. And then the best lead into that is probably like Electabuzz, Ursaluna, but into that I still get to Tailwind and just Wave Crash the Ursaluna slot. Worst case, they protect Ursaluna and taunt me, but then I just Wave Crash Muddy Water, and they are either losing their Blood Moon slot or they are forced to follow me. So the Terra Dark was basically essential in that matchup to stop them from just leading Indeedee Sneasler into me. I do think that matchup is still quite even, but without Terra Dark, it would be well in their favour. And the next Pokemon is Archaludon. I was running fairly standard with Assault Vest and Stamina. This spread outspeeds Modest Pelipper by 3, I believe? By 4. So anything I was trying to creep Modest Pelipper, I should be outspeeding. This spread doesn't do too much else. I think this defense investment is so that I take a +2 Terra Dark Sucker Punch from a Kingambit when I've not Terra'd. I wanted to go Modest to just do more damage, but I didn't think that wasting extra investment on Modest was worth it, because your investment is basically Electroshot. Like, some people go 36 special attack investment, and although I do think that is good because it does hit the bump, I don't think it's necessary. It's actually my friend Taryn Birdie who told me that that probably isn't needed, and just going 4 special attack is probably best. And then with moves, Electroshot is one of the main reasons to run Archaludon on Rain. It's a really powerful move that gets you to +1 on the first turn and then hits them on the second turn, but in Rain, you don't have to have the charge turn. What I think is especially strong with Electroshot is you get the +1 before you attack. So it's essentially the same damage as a stab moves. So if you ever think to yourself, oh, should I Draco Meteor or Electroshot? Electroshot is the choice because they're the same power, but you're boosting your special attack with Electroshot, whereas you're lowering it with Draco Meteor. Next I went with Body Press. Body Press works very well with Stamina because it's done based off of defense boost, and it works with Terra Fighting. So one of the main reasons to go Terra Fighting is because it gives you stab Body Press, which if you're like +5 because you've scale shotted yourself or just you've been hit that many times, starts doing some insane damage. But there are a few other reasons that I wanted to go Terra Fighting. One of the biggest ones being Kingambit. Now, I think that Rain has been very powerful this entire format, but Kingambit with Follow Me has always felt like a bit of an issue, because if they get to +2, then Sucker Punches are doing way too much damage to all of your team. But with Terra Fighting, you can then resist the Sucker Punch, Body Press them back to get the one shot, and suddenly your Rain team that usually sort of struggles into Kingambit really isn't struggling ever again. So that was the main thing that sold me on Terra Fighting. And then one thing that I found from testing Terra Fighting is how good defensively it is. Now, Archaludon is such a bulky Pokemon that it doesn't mind getting hit from neutral attacks a lot of the time, it just doesn't want to be hit by super effective attacks. And if you go a more usual Terra like Grass or Fairy, versus a Sneasler, you would have to Terra to not be weak to their close combat, but then you are weak to their Dire Claw, whereas Terra Fighting means you are neutral into both, and Archaludon does not mind being hit by neutral attacks that much. And there's not too much in the format that actually hits fighting. So obviously fairies hit it, but the main fairies that exist in this format are Volcarona, which will have to use its Terra, and you probably don't have to Terra versus it anyway, and Primarina, which you can just Electro Shot. There are Psychic types, but a lot of Psychic types are on Psy Spam teams where you don't want to use your Terra on Archaludon anyway, and then Flying types, there's only really Pelipper, so you might have to be careful around Pelipper because you might want to Terra in front of an Archaludon to not be weak to their body press, but you will just have to play around it. So fighting was just an insanely strong Terra the whole time. I rarely ever used it for the stab body press, I used it to get rid of my weaknesses. And then the last two moves to talk about are Draco Meteor and Flash Cannon. So we've been seeing Snarl on a lot of Archaludons, and I do think Snarl is good, but there are so many dragons in this format, and now there's so many Terra Fairies that I decided I wanted Dragon Stab and Steel Stab, and the Steel Stab should always be Flash Cannon. Now, the Dragon Stab can either be Draco Meteor or Dragon Pulse, and I decided to go Draco Meteor just to be able to nuke Amoonguss. So, as you'll see, this team has no Terra Grasses on it. I'm not Terra Grass Archaludon, and I'm not Terra Grass Basculegion, so Amoonguss can be a bit of an issue. But I do have some ways of stopping Amoonguss from being annoying that I'll talk about later. But just because I can stop Amoonguss from doing what it wants to do in an early game, sometimes an Amoonguss in the back can be an issue. But with Draco Meteor, all I need to do is get to +2 with 2 Electro Shots, and then Draco Meteor should be one-shotting an Amoonguss. And then if a Terra Fairy, I would have to make the read on if I Flash Cannon or Draco Meteor them. In my round 7 against Teotim, who actually top 4'd for regional, there was a turn where I Flash Cannoned their Amoonguss and Tailwinded with my Pelipper as they protected their Hydreigon and Terra Fairied their Amoonguss. So I just one-shot the Amoonguss and got Tailwind up, and that literally just won me the set that turn. And if I didn't have the threat of Draco Meteor, then they maybe would not have made that play. So Archaludon, very good Pokemon, MVP of the team, but on a rain team, you kind of want it to be. Next, let's talk about Sinistcha. So the main reason to run Sinistcha instead of Amoonguss is Hospitality. Now, Hospitality means you heal a quarter on switching, which for Archaludon is huge, because it's very hard to one-shot Archaludon, or even two-shot it in a lot of cases, so being able to just get rid of some of that damage right away is really nice. Like, if you compare Sinistcha to Amoonguss, say you want recovery on your Archaludon. With Sinistcha, you can just switch it in and you get it straight away. Whereas with Amoonguss, you'd have to switch it in and then Pollen Puff the next turn, which is basically letting your opponent get 4 attacks off on your Archaludon before you can even get the Pollen Puff off, which can be game changing. Whereas with Sinistcha, a lot of the time, I would just switch it in, get the Hospitality, and then because I'm at decent HP again, I can just start Rage Powdering, kind of sack my Sinistcha, but then when it goes down, my Archaludon is still quite healthy. I went with Citrus Berry just to keep it around longer. It means you can take double ups better. For moves, match Gotcha, there's not really any reason not to. It's a spread move that does decent damage, even though Sinistcha isn't very strong, but the HP recovery and the 20% burn chance is actually really nice. So it is easily Sinistra's best attacking move. Rage Powder you really want because Redirection is just really powerful. Trick Room I didn't end up using that much, but when I did use it, it would usually win me the game. And I think it's just really powerful to have both Tailwind and Trick Room on a team, even if you don't have a really good Trick Room abuser like I do on this team. You can also use it to reverse Trick Room, which is really nice. And then Life Tube just heals a quarter of your Sinistcha and your partner, which is really good with Archaludon. I actually haven't spoken about how Hospitality is really good with Multiscale as well, so that's another thing. You don't really use it with Pelipper or Basculegion much, but I guess you could bring your Sash back or get rid of your recoil, and with Incineroar it's quite nice as well. It actually works really well with Incineroar because you can sort of just keep switching between Incineroar and Sinistcha. You can just like intimidate something, fake out, and then next turn you parting shot, or if you need to, you can just straight switch into Sinistcha, heal your Archaludon or Dragonite, wherever you're next to, and then go back into Incineroar. And it basically just makes your team a lot bulkier than it should be because you keep healing your HP and you keep using damage reduction. So that's really nice. This spread is just for bulk. I don't know if it does anything. I think this just hits the bump. Yeah, this spread does nothing, but it was good. And then Terra Water just felt like a good Terra type to be. I know other people have been Terra Dark, but with Terra Dark and Pelipper, I don't think it was needed. And Terra Water is just a very good defensive typing, but it maybe could be something else. And then next is Basculegion. So Basculegion, I went with the Life Orb Swift Swim set. So usually you see Choice Band or Choice Scarf adaptability. I decided I kind of wanted Protect on it. I really like just having Protect, especially when you're Swift Swim, because it means you can pivot around your Drizzle a lot better. So with moves, I went Wave Crash because it just does a lot of damage. Last Respects is one of the best things about Basculegion, getting more powerful as your Pokemon fainted, making Basculegion a very good late game sweeper. Aqua Jet is just nice priority. There'd be a good amount of situations where my opponent would stall out my rain, but would be on so low HP that it meant that I could just Aqua Jet them, which is another very powerful thing about being able to switch moves, is because you're not forced to Wave Crash when your rain is gone, because if they're in Aqua Jet range, you just Aqua Jet them. And then Protect was just very nice. I think when you can fit Protect on a Pokemon, you probably should. And on Basculegion, people don't really expect Protect, so being able to Protect can throw some people's game plans out the window. The spread's fairly standard. I just wanted as much damage as possible, and then max speed just to beat other Basculegions, I guess. I basically thought trying to make it bulky didn't really make much sense when I was Life Orb and probably clicking Wave Crash a lot of the time, so that's why I went with this spread. And I went with Terra Water instead of what you'd usually see, which is Terra Grass. I just liked the idea of making it do more damage, but it also gets rid of some weaknesses like Ghost and Dark. And I also think that having some offensive Terra types is really nice, because say you're in a matchup where you don't need to use any of your defensive Terra types, having the option to use an offensive one means you can still Terra, whereas sometimes if you're using a team with only defensive Terra types, there'll be matchups where you never get to use your Terra and it feels like a bit of a waste. And Water was actually very important in the Hard Trick Room Psyspam matchup, because when you Terra Water Wave Crash, you have a 70% chance to one-shot an Indeedee. And that is a max bold Indeedee. You have a 70% chance to one-shot. So I faced a Psyspam team, I think it was around 5, and they led Indeedee Hatterene versus me, and I led Basculegion Incineroar, and I Terra Wave Crashed, one-shot the Indeedee, parting shotted the Hatterene, which forces them to switch out because of Magic Bounce, and suddenly I just won the game turn 1 because of that, whereas if I didn't have Terra Water, I wouldn't be able to do that. I do think that a Scarf adaptability set could also work. It's actually slightly more powerful than Life Orb, but just being able to Protect was very nice. And then lastly, Incineroar. Now, a lot of this is very standard, but I did have Taunt on it. Now, I've spoken about before how Taunt I added because Amoonguss was an issue, because I have no way of stopping Amoonguss from sporing me otherwise. So I wanted Taunt, but Taunt ended up being really useful the entire tournament, being able to stop Follow Me's, stop Trick Rooms. Like, you'll see when I talk about my round 10 on stream, Taunt Incineroar was insanely good, and I never missed Flare Blitz. Like, I decided to go Knock Off because knocking off items is very powerful, and it's not weakened by the rain. Fake Out and Passing Shot are the reason to run Incineroar. It just lets you position better, but Taunt was just so good. And I think it's quite telling that the 3 highest placing reigns in that tournament all had Taunt Incineroar. Second place had it, Pado, who went 11-0 in Swiss, had it, and then I had it. And I went with Terra Ghost just because I know that's fairly standard. I wasn't sure what to go with. I didn't use it much, but when I did, it was very useful. And then with the spread, so the speed is to outspeed Sneasler in Tailwind, but it actually is 1 above what you would need to do that. So I should be outspeeding a lot of Pokemon who have just trained to 95 to outspeed Sneasler. I actually think that might have come into play in my stream game as well, because I outspeeded an Ursaluna, which on those Tailwind Trick Room teams are probably hitting 95 a lot of the time. So being 96 was very useful. The rest of the spread, I can't remember what it does. My friend Rebecca made it, so shout out to her for this amazing spread. I can't remember what it does, but it was very good the entire time. So yeah, that is the team that I used to get 10th place at the Stuttgart Regional Championships, going 8-0 in day 1. So if you did like this video, please like, comment, subscribe. It's free and you could always unsubscribe later. And make sure to subscribe if you want to see me talking about my stream game. And maybe I'll talk about other stream games I've had, because I've actually played a decent amount. But yeah, it also has the added chance of a 30% chance to lower an opponent's foe. What?